As usual with Dickens's serialised novels in parts, we're treated to a bumper double issue to round the proceedings off. In fact, there are only 48 pages of the novel proper, as the other 16 pages are made up with the prelims. Title pages, dedication, contents, errata, and a preface, about which more later. Why can't Ham and Emily be reunited? It could be argued that she broke her promise to marry Ham and that she's tainted by her affair with Steerforth. However, Ham is never consulted on the matter. Couldn't he have gone to Australia and started life anew with Emily in a country where no one knew them or her past? Of course he could. The reason they never meet or communicate directly after her return is that Dickens had already predetermined his fate, whipping up a magical storm so that Ham could die trying and failing to save Steerforth. Let's end with some positive news. The Scottish writer Robert Louis Stevenson was born in this month, most famous as the author of Treasure Island and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The first organised athletic event of modern times, a cross-country steeplechase known as a foot grind, was held by Exeter College, Oxford. This would lead, 46 years later, to the establishment of the modern Olympic Games. And in Salford near Manchester, Britain's first completely free lending library was opened to the public. Books, learning and entertainment for the masses. 19th century progress in full swing. Dickens and his company performed Ben Jonson's comedy Every Man in His Humour for 3 nights at Nebworth. A resounding success by all accounts. Even though it's dated October, Dickens's preface to David Copperfield was published in November and contained some interesting confessions. Dickens felt as if he were dismissing some portion of himself into the shadowy world, and that no one could believe in his characters in the reading more than he did in the writing. No wonder he needed a break after that 2 years burst of concerted creative effort. There's plenty to enjoy in the final advertiser, comprising 32 bound-in pages as well as some tipped-in slips, but I'll confine myself to some Dickens-related adverts. First of all, there's an ad for Copperfield itself, now available bound in cloth or the publisher's half Morocco, a variant not considered by bibliographers. Binding cases were also available for purchase by owners of parts such as these, who wanted to preserve them in book form. Then there's an ad for the cheap edition of Dickens's works, now complete in 8 volumes. It was complete up to 1850, but over the next 17 years a further 10 titles were added, including David Copperfield in 1858. And finally there's this small ad for a new song entitled Clara from David Copperfield by Mr. G. Linley. The question is, which Clara? As there were 2 Claras, Copperfield and Peggotty. And which of those 2 most closely resembled the dedicatee, Mrs. Charles Dickens? The last letter clue was on the screen just now. Don't forget, of the 2 clues each week, the first is part of a Copperfield-related anagram and the second makes up a cryptic clue. Missed some? Forgotten or mislaid them? Go back and watch again! Don't forget, someone's going to win this 1853 first edition of Bleak House, valued at least $400, completely free. So it's worth taking the trouble to enter the competition. When you've worked out the solution, just drop me an email to this address. To give everyone time to catch up, the deadline for entries is June the 4th, and I'll be making the draw and posting a video with the competition result on Saturday, June the 11th, 2022. Good luck! I suggested in the introductory video to this series that Dickens's reading of Robert Hunt's The Poetry of Science had a profound impact on the author just before he began work on this novel. You may be interested to learn that the protagonist is referred to as Davy roughly 3 times as often as David throughout the course of the novel. And a major presence in The Poetry of Science is the great Humphrey Davy, himself a poet before he became a natural philosopher. Although mostly remembered now for the miner's safety lamp, far more significant were Davy's discoveries of several new elements, only made possible by his voltaic cell, composed of alternate layers of zinc and, you guessed it, copper. We have 4 plates to consider this time, 2 referring to the end of the novel and 2 to be inserted at the beginning. Playing God in his own fictional universe, Dickens reunites David and Traddles with Creakle, who's now a magistrate, and has him show off 2 model prisoners during their inspection of a jail, none other than the humble Uriah and the deferential Litimer. And here's Dan Peggotty making his return from the land down under to bring news of the emigrants. David and Agnes, who by the way got married, are blessed with an indeterminate number of children, but 3 appear in the image, and Dora's portrait hangs above the mantelpiece. This iconic vignette of Emily on the beach appears on what is known technically as the extra title page. Incidentally, during the course of this video series, there was a thread in the comments about Dan Peggotty's boathouse, maintaining that nowhere in the text is it stated that the boat is upside down. True enough, it isn't stated. But if you read very, very carefully, as I have, you'll find that Dickens does indicate that the boat is inverted. Don't believe me? Start reading again then. The frontispiece depicts Aunt Betsy's first appearance out of the blue on the day David was born. Let's end then where we began. My father had often hinted that she seldom conducted herself like any ordinary Christian, and now, instead of ringing the bell, she came and looked in at the window, pressing the end of her nose against the glass to that extent that my poor dear mother used to say it became perfectly white and flat in a moment. She gave my mother such a turn that I've always been convinced I'm indebted to Miss Betsy for having been born on a Friday. I asked you a question at the start of this marathon that I promised to answer at the end. Does anyone remember? What do we learn about David Copperfield Sr. and what do we never learn? That's it. We learn from Mr. Omer his height, 5 foot 9 inches, and that young David came to resemble him as an adult. We don't find out anything about his ancestry other than that Aunt Betsy, who's really David's great-aunt, was his aunt. We don't find out why he was living in such an out-of-the-way place as Blunderstone, or what, if any, his profession was, and certainly not why his son David is referred to as a young gentleman. What did David inherit from him? A kind and loving nature, a passion for old novels, and, most importantly, a name. I give you David Copperfield. Thank you and goodbye.